Dear YouTubers, welcome to Real Turkey channel. And this is Atilla Yeşilada. He's still alive, though how long that will last, only the Lord can answer. Because the COVID-19 outbreak is something else in this country. The official patient count is 3,300, but according to Turkish Medical Association, the daily cases could be as high as 84,000. So being 60 years old and have been seeped in bad habits for the last 45 years or so, I'm staying home. I'm not washing my hair. I'm not washing myself at all. Why bother? We're all eventually gonna die. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about an even more unpleasant subject, Cyprus. I am a pacifist. I hate war. I hate to talk about human tragedy and suffering. So I avoided the subject of Cyprus like a rabid possum sniffing around my tail. But our Mr. President, our POTUS, Mr. Erdogan, won't let me. It's my job to cover important political and economic developments in Turkey. And yesterday, our president visited with his partner in crime, MHP leader Mr. Bahçeli, the no-man's zone in Cyprus called Varosha or Marash in Turkish, which has been closed to settlement and visitations since the 1974 war between Turkish military and the Greek Cypriots. And this is where the troubles start. The Turkish narrative is that the two military campaigns we staged in 1974 were wars of liberation. We have liberated the poor Turkish minority from genocide, which is what I believe, but I'm fairly sure most Greeks won't agree with me. But at the end of that war, the island was essentially split into two communities with very strict border enforcement between them. And Varosha, one of the resort towns of Cyprus, was left in the Turkish part. But it was sort of left aside as a gift for the final settlement, and no Turks have settled there, or there has been no commerce or travel. When Mr. Erdogan visited Varosha with Mr. Bahçeli and the president of the Northern Cyprus Turkish Republic, Mr. Nahit Tatar, he spilled out the beans. He wants a two-state solution in Cyprus. A simple sentence, which doesn't mean much to 99% of the people on this planet, but it's something I'm sure that will force EU, Athens, and the Greek Cypriots lose sleep and start protesting again. The two-state solution essentially means that Turkey will no longer support reunification in the island, and it will defend and advocate the separation of the Turkish community from the Greek community forever. In other words, the Northern Cyprus Turkish Republic, which is only recognized by Turkey, will seek diplomatic recognition and will refuse reunification talks. To me, that sounds like the best solution. I'm a very simple man. I'm not an international diplomat. I don't like to talk legalese. But the question of whether we should have a united Cyprus, where Greeks and Turks live together side by side, or whether there should be two separate tiny republics, is essentially a question that should be posed to the people on the island. You do referenda on both sides, ask them if they want to live together, And if one side doesn't, well then, as far as I'm concerned, the question is settled. I don't know how the Greek Cypriots feel. I have a strong sense that they don't necessarily want to live with Turks side by side, but that remains a conjecture. But I know how Turkish Cypriots feel. They don't want to live with Greeks. The horrifying memories of the Greek slaughter of Turks is just too deep. Now, don't misunderstand me. I try to avoid bias, which is very difficult in subjects like Kurds, Armenians, and Greek Cypriots, but I'm fairly sure hundreds of thousands of Greek Cypriots who either fled northern Cyprus or were forced out by the Turkish military feel as grieved and as violated as the Turkish Cypriots do. Why can't there be peace on the island? Well, for one thing, Greek Cypriots have no incentive to compromise with the Turkish Cypriots simply because they are a member of the EU. And the EU recognizes the entire island as being under the sovereignty of Greek Cypriots. In some sense, the EU has decided to end off this conflict in favor of Greek Cypriots, and why should they compromise? I mean, they have the right, if not the might, on their side. Of course, there has been like 30 rounds of peace talks, and they have not gotten anywhere because the Greek Cypriot demands and Turkish Cypriot needs are different. Let's go over them. First, Greeks want a loose confederation where there is free circulation of citizens among the Turkish and Greek cantons, as well as the right to buy property or settle anywhere on the island. But that would mean that when it comes to political choices or processes, they would have majority even in Turkish cantons. Simply because, as far as I know, there are 1.5 million Greek Cypriots and only roughly 500,000 Turkish Cypriots. So that solution, even though it sounds sensible, is politically not feasible. 2, they want the abrogation of 1960 London and Zurich treaties. What do they mean? They give Turkey, UK, and Greece protectorship or guarantorship on the peace in the island. For the Turkish side, this means we can keep our soldiers there to defend our Turkish minority from Greek aggression. If it were to happen, I'm not suggesting Greeks have attacked Turks in any way over the last 40 years or so. Greeks want those treaties to be abrogated, which means Turkey won't have any soldiers on the island. But the problem is, most Turkish Cypriots want Turkish soldiers on the island as guarantee for future attempts to genocide or ethnic cleansing. From a diplomatic viewpoint, Cyprus is like 40 miles from the Turkish coast. And why any nation would leave such a valuable asset behind for a nebulous peace treaty, that doesn't make sense to me. It's not practical. That's not how real politics works. 3, they want part of the land back and reclaim all of the properties they left in the north. They want the best pieces of land to be returned to Greek Cypriots. Essentially, the sharp end of the island overlooking Turkey, which would give Greek Cypriots a military advantage over Turkey. And another area which is the most fertile and the wet area of Cyprus. Of course, Turks say, good luck, we're not doing that. Now, of course, Greeks are entitled to their properties in the north, but there's a human problem there. These properties have been given to Turks who fled the southern part of the island, as well as settlers from Turkey. Now, essentially, what Greeks want is to tell the Turkish side, all these people, to vacate their properties with no compensation or compensation provided by questionable mechanisms and find somewhere else to live. This is simply not feasible. I mean, imagine your whole neighborhood coming under government edict which says, well, sorry guys, your deeds are no longer valid. This belongs to other people. Get out of here now. Well, of course, Turks propose a different mechanism. We pay for the properties, and you can buy a similar property in the south. In fact, that's the solution approved by the European Court of Human Rights, and there is a property conflict resolution mechanism on the island, arbitrated by Turkish and Greek Cypriots as well as independent judges or educators, I believe. But so far there has been few applications to these from Greeks who want to have their property back. They may have perfectly legitimate reasons for doing so, but of course this creates fears among the Turkish community that the concealed reason behind the property swap is not necessarily the value of or the sentimental value of the properties, but Greeks' desire to settle in Turkish territories, to reduce them to the status of a minority once again, so that they will be underrepresented in the political processes. And finally, Greeks want 150,000 Turkish settlers to go back to Turkey. That's a no-starter. I mean, these people have become Turkish Cypriots. They have been there for 40 years. I'm not saying Greeks are wrong or Turks are right. What I'm trying to say is that what Greeks propose for peace are unacceptable to Turks, and they'll never settle for these conditions. So we have two paths going forward. The first is the status quo, where Greeks claim they own the whole island, and Turks say no way. We will have disputes on the continental shelf and on the ownership of potential natural gas and oil reserves to be discovered offshore. Turkish Navy will harass anyone who is drilling for natural resources. And this unending conflict between Turkey and Greece about the status of Cyprus, as well as the conflict between Turkey and EU about the status of Cyprus. It's possible, but that's just not a very pleasant sense of affairs, simply because it stops progress on many areas. Turkey cannot become a member of EU because Greek Cypriots and Greeks veto the opening of new acquis chapters. Roughly 500,000 Turkish Cypriots don't exist. They don't exist in the eyes of the world community. They cannot get passports, and they have no diplomatic status. That to me is sad. The second path is simple. It's what Mr. Erdogan suggested. Two different republics, no land swap, but ample compensation determined by international committee of experts to redeem Greek Cypriots for their losses. Land has a value. Properties have a value. How much is it worth? How much value do you assign the 5 to 10% of the Turkish Cypriot lands that Greeks want? How many properties have they left behind, and what would be their market value today, plus, some compensation for the emotional damage they have suffered. I think this is the way to go forward, because it will solve a variety of problems. As equal republics, they will be able to negotiate on the continental shelf and on the split of the natural resources to be found. The issue will disappear as a source of conflict between Turkey and Cyprus, and Turkey will be able to make progress in EU. Greeks may not want that, but nations who make progress towards EU membership or become EU members are very unlikely to stage war on their neighbors. or to try to invade their land. So integrating Turkey into EU is probably the best solution for Greece and Greek Cypriots to avoid further conflict in the region. And under the aegis of EU, the problems that beset the Turkish-Greek relationship, namely who owns what part of Aegean Sea or Eastern Mediterranean, can be solved using the regular dispute-solving mechanisms of the EU. Yeah, I know I am going to get kicked in the head for this video, but this is how I feel and this is what I think makes sense. So, this is Cyprus for you. And I think Mr. Erdogan made a great service to all the parties involved by laying out the truth and putting it on the table. Whether the world or Greek Cypriots accept it or not is a different problem. If they don't, we'll have 50 years more of negotiations which lead to nowhere. This was Atilla Yeşilada sadly saying goodbye from Istanbul. Bye-bye.